Hello everyone, welcome back to OCD Recovery's YouTube channel. What we're going to do is for the next 5 to 10 videos, we've done a lot of videos, well I have, talking about misconceptions during OCD recovery and all aspects of the journey. But what we're going to do is we're going to take each point and kind of elongate them into each particular video. They'll be 6 to 10 minutes long, maybe some a little bit longer if I get talking a lot. So subscribe, like that video, and let me know what you think about this topic. I want to start with trauma because there's a lot of misconceptions about trauma in the OCD community, and I want to cover a bunch of them. So one of the biggest things that stops people from going towards hard exposures and going towards, really big triggering situations is the fear that being too anxious is going to cause a new trauma and you're going to get stuck in the cycle forever. And this is a misconception about triggering, and this is the misconception about exposures. I've never seen one person who has done a hard exposure and created a new trauma to where they had a whole new set of problems. I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but I've yet to see that. The other thing I want to talk about is how trauma is overused. And this is a problem in mental health communities, especially in the social media aspect, and on the media as well. So we're not talking about like severe PTSD or severe sexual trauma and severe neglect and abuse, the ones that really are probably maybe turning factors, triggering factors for expressing the gene, because OCD is more than likely genetic. One of my favorite quotes is, genetic loads the gun, lifestyle, environment, and experiences pulls the trigger. That's a great quote by Brene Brown. But it is important to talk about that because everything now is considered a trauma. It's completely overused, and it really holds a lot of sufferers back. This isn't to say that we're not trying to invalidate the experiences in your life, but what happens is, when someone's afraid they've gone through a big trauma, and there's a lot of people called trauma OCD specialists, which is kind of an oxymoron, and this isn't to put anyone down. What happens is sufferers tend to go into the past, and they're constantly looking at, if my brain is broken, there has to be a moment I have to pick apart. Really important, really problematic with, say, false memory and real event OCD. It's just a big reassurance nightmare for OCD sufferers where they kind of get stuck and they don't work on their current beliefs. Now, when you're going through exposures and you're trying to find a way to move forward, there is a hierarchy of ways you want to go about it. I mean, someone with severe, say, POCD or HOCD, I just like using those examples because they're a little bit more common than, say, sensory motor. They don't want to throw themselves into their hardest exposure because the chances are they're going to completely freak out. So it has to be kind of tailored to what, you look at someone, what their fears are, what their biggest fears are, and you kind of start small. With harm OCD, maybe it's watching a documentary, watching a cooking show where people are using knives, and then kind of going up to holding a knife in your hand and really feeling that anxiety. So there are times where exposures need to go, but there is a misconception that people think if I have too much of a trigger and too much anxiety, I'm going to lock in this new OCD cycle because the exposure was too big. And that's just not the case. Now, I want to go back to talking about trauma specifically. Dr. Albert Ellis, who's the founder of REBT, who really kind of created unconditional self-life and other acceptance, which is a precursor to CBT. Now, CBT and RBT together are basically the same thing. And then you have rational motive imagery and all sorts of different aspects about cognitive behavioral therapy, looking at things through a rational lens for what they are, objective reality. Now, what we noticed was for 80 years, the trauma was looked at as the primary aspect of why people are depressed, chronic anxiety, OCD, and stuff like that. This isn't to say that they don't have a factor, because they definitely do. Definitely our environment and backgrounds and cultural experiences and situations do predicate the belief systems leading up to where we are now. But the best example I always use is if someone comes into you and you're a tennis instructor and you're looking at their swing and you just say to them, hey, look, your forehand sucks. Your serve isn't good. You're not getting off the ground high enough. You're not moving well throughout the court. You're not going to sit down for 3 months and dive into and divulge, oh, why are they swinging like that? But that's what we do in mental health. We go, well, let's go back into the past and kind of unwind this trauma. Maybe you had a really poor relationship with your mother or your father, or maybe a sibling. Maybe you were in Iraq and you were in an IED explosion and lots of people passed away, but you lived, survivor's guilt and stuff like that. Maybe it triggered obsessive compulsive disorder or maybe PTSD. What a lot of people do is they're going back and looking and spending the majority of the time on that. So I kind of want to write this out for you. So this is what we know we have. And you hear us talk about this a lot. And this is really important. So the bottom, okay, right here, can you see it? Yeah. So A equals C, activating events equal emotional consequence. This is the way that the trauma people who are really big on the trauma, they want to go back and dive in, which is really problematic for OCD, for the majority. Kirsty has talked about this a lot. It was just a dead end cycle. I know other people who have spent years trying to dive up information and they've gotten nowhere because all you can do is work on your current belief in the now. But what Dr. Albert Ellis realized when creating REBT in the mid 50s and really putting it into practice by the late 50s is we have A plus B equals C. That's A minus. Let's do that again. A plus B equals C. So the activating event and your current belief on that situation is really the big thing. So let's use me. I'm a great example. We'll use a sensory motor. So maybe, a lot of people, and this isn't to say this is trauma, but this is the way that people might look at it. That's giving, not the best information. When somatic OCD latched for me, I was in a really stressful environment in my life. My father had passed away. I lost my aunt. My dog had died that was living with my mom, who I grew up with. I was in grad school getting my doctorate. It was just a really big, and I had so many irrational beliefs. Many people would be like, oh, well, let's go back and look and dive into your father and stuff like that. But that's a misconception. That has nothing to do with why I developed sensory motor OCD. Well, that's not true. It has more than likely something to do with it. But the current belief I'm holding right now, my heightened experience, my belief, fear of being stuck forever, this shouldn't happen to me, conditional life acceptance, it's really what's heightening up the experience of sensory motor. So although you went through a traumatic event, and it is important to acknowledge that, you just want to be like, that never happened to me and block it out because that's avoidance. But the majority of what you want to work on is the B. So you want to work on the current belief system because let's say, this X thing happened in your life and then over the next year you developed harm OCD. A lot of people might be like, well, you got to go back and look and pick apart. Let's work on the current belief I'm holding about why this shouldn't have happened to me, those shoulds, musts, and oughts. So if anyone's telling you that the trauma is the primary aspect of your emotional consequence, whether that's OCD, chronic anxiety, GAD, or any of these other emotional or unhealthy emotions, such as extreme resentfulness, extreme anger. Anger is a big one. A lot of people will say, well, the trauma in your life is exactly why you're angry. That could not be anything from the truth. It did absolutely add to it, but that belief you're holding right now, because many people might have been in that same situation like you. I use a motor vehicle accident. Some people say, oh, well, I got hit in the back by a semi. Now I'm always angry at the road on semis. When other people might have gotten into the accident and they were angry that day, but then they kind of got over it. Well, the belief system they have right now is usually the driving factor of that, with other things, genetic components and stuff like that. But it really comes down to the belief. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if maybe someone's talked to you about trauma. Write whatever you want. Let me know if you don't agree with me, and then we'll go from there. Don't forget to like that video and have a good one.